Torn Kevlar, distressed leather and molly-webbing, acrylic paint, mud and used cigarette cartons, prayer charms of wood and bakelite, faces of ballistic ceramic. Ever since I first came in contact with it, there was something special about this world, about the strange, abstract familiarity of its shapes, about the utter contrast, yet cohesion, of its characters and tone. And yet, for the last year, why it hits such a specific nerve, how so many instantly iconic designs could materialize in one place at once, it's been sort of a mystery. Even through hours of talks with the artists, days of poring over renders, illustrations, mood boards, it wasn't until just now that everything clicked. This is the story of the character art of the Forever Winter.
This parking meter is a kind of miniature example of the whole visual concept of accumulation.
This is an interview with Sid Mead.
You'd start with a recognizable parking meter inside all this stuff.
One of the single most influential concept artists of our time and inadvertently responsible for the cyberpunk genre, on the set of 1982's Blade Runner.
When you no longer can accept coins or metal discs or whatever, you add a electronic register.
He, like any good art director, understood that the best storytelling is visual. Random items, pieces of clothing, silhouettes, they say as much, if not more, about a world than any piece of written lore ever could. And the world is where the Forever Winter was born. In a very literal sense. In the DeviantArt days, as Fundog Studios CEO Miles Williams calls them, this small group of concept artists wanted to challenge themselves. And the Forever Winter, before it was a motion comic, a book, a game, it was an idea, a reason to create a mid-apocalypse sci-fi universe of a different shade. Most cyberpunk universes exist by proxy of a boom in technology due to a global conflict between factions, and thusly so were the Forever Winter's initial inspirations. Akira, Appleseed, Judge Dredd, 1984, Terminator, Venus Wars, the classic cyberpunk media of the 1980s. But instead of a power fantasy, that classic perspective of the space marine or cop, the universe in its earliest iterations was an art book, a World War Z-like phonojournalist's journey through a mechanized war through the eyes of lost grunt fire teams, civilian rebels, child soldiers, helmet cameras, and CCTV feeds. This was a mech war, but the perspective was everything, and you would never be viewing this world from the cockpit of one of these mechs themselves. However, that's not always how things go, such as in maybe the most perfectly themed sponsor for today, War Robots Frontiers, who have just launched the brand new Smuggler's Run Battle Pass, which includes a new Scorpion War Robot, the Tusk Shotgun, Gamma Beam and Homing Missile gear, new wraps, decals, and much, much more. What is War Robots? Simple, it's anything a lover of mech on mech PvP could love. A full-on title developed in Unreal 5, independently of the beloved mobile game, with widely ranging galactic battlefields complete with destruction and dynamic weather. Extensive mech customization, allowing you to team up tactically and fill the role of anything from a stalwart defender, supportive tactician, or speedy fast flanker, or of course, anything in between you can imagine. The arsenal of modules and skills is there for you to play with and answer any challenge that other players throw at you. War Robots Frontiers just launched the Smuggler's Run Battle Pass on PC, PS4, and 5, as well as Xbox Series X and S and Xbox One, so everyone is welcome. And to start playing for free right now on any platform, just hit that link in my description or pinned comment right now, or scan the QR code on screen to jump in and start scrapping some mechs across galactic battlefields. Thank you so much again to War Robots Frontiers for supporting the channel today. Perspective is everything. And as the Forever Winter transitioned from a purely observational experience to a tactile, interactive one, as the team began to assemble the earliest ideas of the Forever Winter as a playable game, as they shared it with colleagues, a tonal problem arose. As art director Rael Lyra simply put it, it was depressing. So depressing, some people said that they'd have a hard time really wanting to spend much time in such a soul-crushing universe. Imagery of mutilated bodies, reduced to meat by towering mechanized war machines, hopeless conscripts without a homeland, the weakest and most vulnerable being punished for simply existing. Who really wants to play that game? The subject matter was unfathomably dark, and it teetered on the precipice of overindulgence. They realized that they were facing a potential mistake, one that many others have fallen into. Take a look at any live-action adaptation of an anime, even ones written and visually directed by the original work's creator. With wide inspirations including media like Children of Men, The Road, even real-life war journalism, Forever Winter had initially had this sort of Neil Blomkamp-esque gritty, realistic aesthetic, while largely also drawing from highly stylized works. Katsuhiro Otomo, Tsutomu Nihei, Makoto Kobayashi, Kao Yokoyama. Stylized influences where stylization was a key understated tool. Stylization, like horror or violence or realism, it sort of exists on a sliding scale. So, for example, take the idea of a firearm in a science fiction context. You have live action work like Aliens. Then maybe someone like Katsuhiro Otomo. Or Mamoru Oshii. Then move along to, say, Hayao Miyazaki. And you follow it far enough, and eventually you end up with something like Fulikuli or Trigun. All of these works with weapons as a central motif. All works which handle them completely differently, with different levels of stylization, and all of which, as a result, say something very, very different. In dialing in on defining the Forever Winter's aesthetic, stylization became a key tenet. Stylization with purpose. By decoding the inspirations that Forever Winter was taking from, by the art team subjecting themselves to the correct visual diet, so-called, creating walls for themselves. We are doing this, we are not doing this. They could stylize the Forever Winter's motifs into a comprehensive, sensical ecosystem of grimdark science fiction, one that made all the right understated references, which told the right story. And in order to see how that process really worked firsthand, you need to understand this world functionally. There's an art to making things make sense. And like Sid Mead with his parking meters, in early science fiction, the fiction was inspired largely by, well, the science, the concept in concept art. A global conflict between two major superpowers, Eurasia and Europa, factions which inherently exist in opposition, their attitudes and ideologies affecting their actions, their technology, their aesthetics. So, let's take Europa, their helmets specifically. You start with an idea, modern NATO-like kit mixed with some Vietnam era, mixed with this sort of knightly look, for lack of a better word, an abstraction of Western military aesthetics over the last 1,000 years. You take some initial shape inspirations from media, the SJS helmet from Judge Dredd, MD Geist, that tech ninja Metal Gear Solid sort of aesthetic, and abstract them out. What do these shapes say? What associations are they bringing? Judge Dredd feels more Western, MD Geist feels more Eastern. Okay, so we need to dial in on those European feeling shapes. As concept artist Kai Lim, mastermind behind the Eurasia faction, says, there's almost a level of stereotyping that you really need to bring forward. Then the technical comes in. Carlos Fuentes, master of industrial design, bringing the abstraction back to reality. Battery packs, Picatinny rail, making an insane futuristic design as real feeling as possible, giving the conceit of a modern knight's helmet a logical explanation. Curves and slits of medieval Franco and Germanic helmets are represented by ballistic applique pads. The iconic curves of an American MICH, abstracted over Comtac headsets, mimic the outer swoop of the 20th century Stahlhelm. Real-life pieces of tech stylized into shapes with subconscious associations. Even more stylized designs like the Grin helmet, which immediately caught my eye when I first saw it. A policeman's cap abstracted into ballistic armor, poetic allegory rationalized through science fiction. The initial idea actually kind of comes from concept. What if the overly ostentatious military cap, this visual manifestation of over-policing, was an actual physical weapon of it? What if the police were literally shooting at you with their ridiculous hats? Like a bodyguard's SMG being literally built into his briefcase, every design is some sort of over-the-top, almost comical allegory, made legitimate through painstaking attention to detail and understanding of industrial design. Yeah, this helmet model really has a functional M4 receiver built inside of it. Then there's Eurasia. In every sense, a faction that exists in opposition to Europa. Where Europa was hobbled together, a country desperately throwing money into robotics R&D, supplementing their outdated, outgunned surplus of past might, Eurasia is machine-stamped, perfected, utilitarian, and streamlined. Here you can bring back in those Eastern influences, Metal Gear and MD Geist, carbon fiber, polycarbonate, and neoprene instead of the rugged Vietnam GI grit of Europa. As a prior conscript himself, Kai would think, okay, if I was a cyborg in a Eurasian strike team, what would be the most comfortable armor for me to move around in, while also, say, allowing me to fall out of an airplane and survive? Bringing back some of the cyber ninja operator juice of black light with less indulgence and more purposeful iteration, every variant of Eurasian cyborg, from these base Terminator-like runners up through the elite units, monstrous brawlers, and commanders, are built off the same core model, in line with Eurasia's military approach. Absolute function comes first, with everything else purpose-built for utility. The cyborg ninja was back, but for the right reasons. And all of this is possible due to a key part of this process: teamwork. What a team like Fundog loses with the lack of a publisher, they gain with the streamlined nature of their iteration. Europa looks the way it does because of one artist's original ideas, another's industrial design prowess, another's interest in kitbash and technical iteration, and without these, the idea only ever makes it part of the way. But sometimes, it does take things pretty damn far. Because remember, it all starts with the concept. Everything is conceit. Everything is an excuse to just do something cool. I want the hero to drive a mech. Okay, but how does your hero get there? Why does he need to be in that situation, and what comes of it? Without a meaningful, conceivable story behind art direction, without building that tension between other elements of story and aesthetics, a design can fall flat, or seem a little bit forced in. When I first saw the Forever Winter's characters, several stood out to me. The Pyro with his aggressively allegorical design, Mother Courage with her references to idol worship and sexuality in the context of warfare. But it was another faction entirely that instantly became my favorite: Yoruska. It was shapes, colors, a form language I had just simply truly not seen, had thought I would likely never see in the context of a video game. That strangely warm, inviting natural shape of Kao Yokoyama's Machine and Krieger, the stretched, almost abstract mecha of Makoto Kobayashi, mixed with strikingly realistic Soviet utilitarianism, leather and bakelite, ceramic shells and spray-painted desert camo. So unfathomably, delectably late 80s Japanese design, but with its own identifiable flavor. I instantly just needed to know how someone could come up with something like this. Why did these shapes and silhouettes bring such a specific feeling of esoteric nostalgia and intrigue, a faction I just wanted to see more of? And every chance that I got, I tried to get that info out of Riloe or Miles, the masterminds behind it. How did you guys do this? Where did you get this or that shape from? What were the decisions that were made? In our most recent talk, Riloe shared with me that, in a way, he didn't know. And that's when it suddenly clicked. All of it. Let's put it this way. I always thought of concept art as a physical medium, one like draftsmanship or carpentry, where ideas and shapes could be measured, defined, improved upon by an artist's technical skill and mastery of form. And talking to Riloe, I realized that what it really is at its highest level, it's a language. It's poetry. When presenting early builds of the Forever Winter to potential investors, Fundog needed a visual representation of their third faction, one that they had ideas of but hadn't exactly nailed down. So Riloe sat down and banged it out. Yoruska, the entire faction's aesthetic, in just a couple of days. There wasn't any lineage of design, no technical iteration. He just nailed it. How does someone do this? Every time that I talked to them about the Yoruska aesthetic, I had gotten these lore dumps. They're this biopunk faction, they would say. Their ideological differences mean they use Eurasia's technological advancements to tweak the human body into new shapes. They're a defensive faction. They patrol the rear lines. They act as support to the more aggressive Eurasian shock troops. I was getting the lore, I was getting the story behind the designs, but not the reasoning. And that's when I realized these were the answers. The storytelling. The concept, the allegory, the reasons the faction existed, these are how the art style arrived at where it did. And it wasn't just for Yoruska. Europa, a faction defined by assimilation of new and old technology, of bashing high tech and low life. Their visual style was defined by collaboration, the combination of years-old concept sketches and precise industrial design, of kitbash. Eurasia, the streamlined and high-tech faction, the frontline troops manufactured for speed and overwhelming aggression. was created through simplistic shapes, layering of assets, custom and purpose-built all at once. The same level of care that Carlos put into technical detail or Kai put into utility, Riloe was putting into the raw, indefinable feeling of Yoruska. Just as factions in opposition in the real world come to look different, look recognizably themselves, sometimes with wildly opposing aesthetics, how the B-2 bomber can be seen alongside the RPG-7 as part of the same conflict at the same time, so do the factions of the Foreverwinter clash yet coexist as part of this larger shared reality of war. And all of them, in the context of the game, exist despite you. I personally first heard this term in Tom Cruise's 2013 film Oblivion. Funnily enough, these scavs were actually designed in part by none other than Kai Lim at the time. Basically, scavs as a concept have become more and more prolific of a character archetype since the Foreverwinter was first conceived. First, The Division, Escape from Tarkov, Death Stranding. Every time a new version of the same core idea was presented, someone who was more of a looter than a fighter, it told the early Fundog team two things. That Foreverwinter's scavs needed to stand out from everything else, and that, well, when someone like Hideo Kojima is working with the same idea as you are, you might be onto something. Scavs are, of course, the most different faction aesthetically. They existed alongside the armies, but they weren't soldiers themselves. Early ideas had them much closer to a freedom fighter aesthetic, hobbled together, rugged and haphazard, but deadly and rebellious. And as the game's world moved further into stylization towards that puppet show allegorical presentation, so did the scavs' design, their existence and purpose in this ecosystem taking the wheel for their design language. Stylization, importantly, did not mean that the characters should look funny or playful. Essentially, what were they? They were losers, but lovable ones. They were not the guy. The oldest scav design currently in the game, Old Man, is the perfect case of stylization of an emotional beat. He's essentially Viggo Mortensen from The Road with an assault rifle. You take one look and can tell this is not a soldier. He's kind of a sad sight. You feel pity for him, but he's not helpless either. The ability for the characters to look cool while simultaneously tragic. Some may be hunters, maybe psychotic, but none of them were that guy. In a way, the scavs and their archetypes, as well as every character design in the game, represent the true diversity of humanity through the lens of conflict. The ways that ideologies shift our presentations of ourselves, our aesthetics, our philosophies, and their repercussions manifested as this choice of tunic or that shape of armor. Some go to war for fun. They relish in blood and power and hatred. Some simply just don't want to be there anymore. And some take advantage, become one with their reality while still maintaining a sense of self, of identity. How far the scavs archetypes could be pushed was a big question when thinking about designing new skins for the characters. Who is Mask Man, Scav Girl, Shaman, Bagman? How far can we push the stylization? Where does the silhouette become unrecognizable? Where does it become a new character? How much is too much? Of course, everything is an excuse to put those cool designs you always dreamed of. For these artists, the ones which sat on the back burner for years, the stuff that never would have flown at a AAA studio. But without strong reasoning, these excuses do become conceit. I'm just doing this because I can. The art style becomes self-indulgent. It's why some sci-fi immediately stands out as iconic and memorable. Why some falls utterly flat. Why brilliant artists' later works sometimes never fill the shoes of their prior ones. And holding things back where they need to be is part of why the Foreverwinter works as well as it does. But most importantly, because everything is balance. Just as an entire game with Yoruska's aesthetic wouldn't hit as hard as their existence alongside Europa does, contrast is what really defines what makes Foreverwinter's world so enticing. Between stylization and gut-wrenching realism, between levity and horror, between brutal, crushing military might and downtrodden underdog desperation, between the diversity and imperfection of humanity and manufactured masks of conventional beauty. All this contrast stands with utter purpose in balance, and by allowing contrast to take center stage with story and world building as structure for believability and soul, the world finds this sense of haphazard, operatic realism rarely found in any media, much less a video game. But the thing is, this doesn't just happen because you want it to. While I did come to understand that the deep intention behind the universe, the careful, curated visual diet that it was inspired by was the reason it looked the way it did, I also came to realize not just anyone can do this. The people who built this hold a level of deep, shared understanding, of curated taste, and of world-class talent that brings a magic you simply cannot buy. and I can speak to this personally. As I mentioned in the last video on this game, Fundog, in a move that I still can't believe, used one of my drawings as concept for the mask on the game's R Cultist, and I just want to put into perspective here. This is the only image they had. I only drew this once, and looking at the 3D model, they just nailed it. This is exactly what I imagined this mask would look like on a real character. They captured every purposeful line, added every unseen detail in 3 dimensions. They even understood what materials these were supposed to be. Based on this. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not the worst illustrator in the world, but this really isn't much to go off of. Very few people on Earth can do that. It's how one painting can turn into a 3D model that in every way captures its exact essence. How such a tiny team can crank out art of such a consistent quality. Put simply, a team with this level of synergy and effortless passion, it doesn't happen very often. It's because of this skill, talent, whatever you want to call it, that they were able to do something truly rare. They were able to create a world that's alluring as it is depressing as it is exciting. A world that has such a rich soul it can be perceived as comedy or tragedy, action or horror, simply depending on its mode of presentation. One that's undoubtedly its own, one that has a story to tell but allows us to tell our own stories within it. It's a world that I truly hope we continue to see in as many forms and iterations as possible for a very long time. And I haven't even talked about the mechs yet. I'm Riloe, and I like to talk about things that I think are cool. Subscribe for more like this, and I will see you very soon. So really quick postscript, that last comment about mechs wasn't just a cheeky jab. From the very beginning of my time interfacing with Fundog in 2024, I knew that I wanted to dive as deep as possible into the incredibly rich mech design of the Forever Winter, and it would need to be its own video. I'm happy to say that that will absolutely finally be happening, and I hope to really get to talk about and show just how insanely sick some of these guys are, as well as the rich history behind ones people have seen in action, including, hopefully, some actual one-on-one discussion with some of the very people who inspired the game's aesthetics in the first place, such as the legend himself, Kao Yokoyama, the creator of Maschinenkrieger. And of course, speaking of mechs, another shout out to War Robots Frontiers. Make sure to click that link in my description or pinned comment, or scan the QR code on screen right now to hop in for free on the platform of your choice. Another huge thank you to War Robots Frontiers for supporting the channel today and helping this video happen. I also just want to give you all a huge thanks for 250,000 subscribers on YouTube. One of my mods pointed out that that's 250,000. That's nuts. For anyone who's new here, I basically started this channel seriously in 2024, so the support has just been ridiculous, and it really, really means a lot. I read every comment and reply to as many as I can. Every kind word really lets me know that I'm doing something worth doing here, so I really appreciate it all more than I can say. One little thing that I will add, since I first started doing videos on Forever Winter, as well as basically every game that I focused on, Beautiful Light, Tarkov, Marathon, what have you, people have been accusing me of being paid by these studios to make these videos. Maybe it's because of my quality of editing or my general positive attitude, I don't know. As I always point out, not clearly stating my advertising is literally illegal. Regardless, I will actually, for the first time ever, have some sponsored videos coming to the channel soon. They will be, of course, a little different from what I usually do, but I choose my sponsors carefully and put an equitable amount of effort into everything. Regardless, I hope you're having a fantastic spring. If you're new here, please leave a like and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And if you are still watching, leave a cheers in the comments to show that you're a real one and apparently have too much time on your hands. Anyway, really appreciate you guys. I'll see you very soon. Peace.